Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Damage Report, still under lockdown. Thank you for joining us today. We have a particular treat for you. Joining us on the show today, attorney and author of Staying in the Game, Adrienne Lawrence. Welcome to The Damage Report.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Very excited to have you on, and in particular for some of the news today, where your legal expertise is going to do a lot of work to make me look a little bit less ill-informed about some of the stories we're going to be talking about. So I'm very excited for that. And we've got a lot of news we're going to be talking about. We've got some updates on the coronavirus, which, what do you know, is an absolute continuing disaster. We've got Michael Flynn, another little wrinkle in his case. Facial recognition doing what facial recognition is going to do. And then finally, we get to talk about Lobster. It's been a long time.
Yes, it has. I miss Lobster.
Yeah, I don't know the last time I had it. Well, like Jim Gaffigan always says, I miss butter, and lobster's a great thing to put butter on.
Oh, it's a straight vehicle for butter. I agree.
Exactly. Before we launch into the stories, I want to give people a little bit of time to sort of join us here. We haven't really talked much about the experience of this pandemic and, you know, being at home and then the wave of protests. How has the past couple of months been for you?
Oh, gosh. It has been an experience, in part because, you know, it's like we all, as Black people, we all lived in a certain world where no one really listened to us. And then having this kind of thing blow up recently, it just essentially throws your oppression in your face and then having people defend it. And then on top of that, the coronavirus, which kind of hit the back burner. But it's like 2020 keeps on delivering.
Yeah.
It's a very special place.
Yeah. Any predictions what you think 2020 is going to hit us with next?
Jesus, I hope 2021. I want this to be over.
Yeah.
That's all. That's the best thing I got going. No.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you're not going to get there until we pass probably devastating wildfire season in California. Hurricanes are going to start to hit. I think 2020 still got some tricks in store for us, let alone the run up to the 2020 election is going to be, I mean, crazy. And I am now, like, you know how, like, we're still waiting to find out in Kentucky, you know, what's happening with all the absentee ballots. And right now, Booker's up in the Senate race. Why is anyone assuming that the same thing isn't going to happen with the general election? That we'll know night of who won? Why? Why are we assuming that? Get ready to go to sleep not knowing who's going to be president when you wake up. Or at least
and to be honest, the trauma, I may not even endure it. You know, I want to be there for people, but 2016 was so jarring to begin with. I just don't know if I could take it anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's the worst year. They're all bad, but they're getting worse. Okay, everyone who's already here waiting for the show to begin, thank you so much for joining us. Feel free to hit the like button, share the stream, let more people know that the show is active. We will be following your comments and Twitch comments and super chats and your tweets at hashtag TDR Live and responding to you throughout. But we've got a absolutely packed show that I'm very excited to launch into. So, Adrienne, why don't we do this?
Let's do it.
Okay. We reported yesterday that three states in the Northeast are instituting a new policy of effectively quarantining people who come in from a number of U.S. states that have higher than average infection rates and all of that. We have Phil Murphy of New Jersey, we've got Ned Lamont of Connecticut, and Cuomo of New York announcing that they're going to be doing these quarantines. And if you do not self-quarantine, if you come in from one of these really hard hit by coronavirus states, you're going to face fines. And so when Donald Trump announced that he needed to go to New Jersey, admittedly for the very important purposes of visiting his golf course in Bedminster, he announced, no, I'm not going to be doing that. And the defense that was provided was that the president of the United States is not a civilian, which I found to be interesting because while he is commander-in-chief of the U.S. military, he's never been a member of the military, and we have prided ourselves for hundreds of years in America for having civilian control of the military. So suddenly it looks like it's not anymore. He has become an avatar of the military when it's convenient for the purposes of quarantines.
Oh, well, when it's convenient for golf as well, because we know he's going there to be on official duty so that, you know, he can swing and miss as he's done just about everything. But it just really speaks to his level of ignorance and indignance and how much he does not care for other people. The fact that he is going to parade through town, bringing in Secret Service and a bunch of other outsiders who, what we saw earlier this week, that he had, I think, like 8 people working with him on the Tulsa team, including 2 Secret Service who tested positive for CV-19.
Yes.
Come on.
No, you're totally right. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because we also found out in the last day that dozens of Secret Service agents are now being told to self-quarantine because they might have been exposed to all these. Again, for a totally needless rally.
Yep.
About as needless as an extra round of golf, I would probably say. And the idea that Donald Trump doesn't feel bound by any of these restrictions or regulations or bits of advice, advisory notices, those sorts of things. We also, remember, we're just coming out of his Arizona rally, and they put out a statement about the fact that Donald Trump and his team and all of the rally attendees had broken local ordinance requiring the use of masks, which carries a fine. Judd Deere, the White House spokesman, said, with regard to Arizona, the White House followed its COVID mitigation plan to ensure the president did not come into contact with anyone who was symptomatic or had not been tested. And I love the honesty of that statement, because it's just about his own personal safety.
Exactly. Not any of the other people that he's essentially corralled a bunch of nonsense people and let them feel licensed to go ahead and disobey the law so that, they can all come and see him talk and he can have a nice, college teen Klan rally. And we are never going to leave our houses again. I don't want to be here.
I know, and the issue is it's the irresponsibility of enough people that causes the crisis to continue. But really think about like if I did, I decide I'm sick of this quarantine, Adrienne. I'm sick of it. I want to have a live show, and I'm going to have a live show, and I'm going to berate everyone at that live show into not wearing a mask. I'll be far away from them. I'm not getting coronavirus, but I want all of you to sit in the stands. Like, think about what that would say about me. That I had browbeaten people into exposing themselves to an illness. And look, we'll find out in 2 weeks that some people got coronavirus at that rally. I have no doubt. They didn't even do temperature checks, which they had said in advance they would. And again, this is a church. The needless cruelty in regards to the health and well-being of the people that went there. But we're more than 3 months into coronavirus. He's had various stances on the pandemic from the beginning. None of them have been productive. But now it's an outright aggression against virtually anything to protect against future loss of life.
Oh, absolutely. And it just really speaks to the fact that we live in a society where certain people believe that the rules don't apply to them and they live accordingly. And how much it always ends up impacting the rest of us. And we are at a loss because those people are flagrant in their violations of the law. Man, this is so on par for who he is. And no, he will not hit par.
Yeah. I like how you loop that back around to the Bedminster there. That's nice.
Do what I can.
So let's talk about some of the consequences of this. Donald Trump has had his strategy when it comes to coronavirus, pretend that it wasn't going to hit. Once it did, pretend that it's going to go away soon. Once it didn't, just pretend that it doesn't exist at all. And that might have seemed like a good strategy for a while. But in terms of his approval rating, it doesn't seem to be working out too well. As of the most recent poll I saw, Reuters Ipsos poll, he has a 37% approval rating on the response to the coronavirus. That is his lowest rating since he started collecting Americans' opinions in early March. 58% now disapprove. And I understand that they're pointing out that that's the worst rating he's had, but imagine how low the bar is that you could fail to this level and 37% of the country be like, yes, sign me up for another pandemic. I want that man in charge.
And that's what scares me the most, because I know that certain like percentage of these people are educated and informed, but there are things that Trump essentially, maybe they value in him largely, racism, sexism, oppression. And so they want to back him. But then there are people who are just, as we've seen on a lot of these kind of shows or whatnot, they're just ignorant. And they don't have the information. They also may not necessarily have the ability to fully process and analyze. But either way, it's scary, very scary for the future of a country.
Yeah. You know what? Let's double down on very scary. I want to give them some more very scary, and also try to explain why maybe his approval rating is finally ticking down, even if the floor seems to be 1/3 of the country thinking he's doing a bang-up job. One reason, potentially, is that yesterday, the U.S. had the most coronavirus cases it's had. Not in the second spike or in a particular state, just overall. Worse than when New York was under full assault with over 36,000 cases reported in a single day. So that's scary, to your earlier point.
We have this cultural identity problem where we've always thought that, and to be honest, I think it's largely white America, has always thought that they're superior than other people. We are a world power. We're number one. We're all this stuff. So the idea that they can be told anything in terms of, hey, science says this, or hey, you should wear a mask, people aren't here for it and they won't listen to it. And it is so dangerous and scary for the rest of us, especially since we know it's Black people and brown people who end up suffering the most and are dying from COVID-19 rates higher than anybody else. And again, it just continues to show that some people don't think they need to listen to the rules, science, anything that is established in order to continue to serve themselves and their own personal interests. We are so incredibly selfish.
Yeah, you're at least 120% right. There's the disparate impact racially that COVID has already had, obviously. But then think about like the two big crises we're in at the same time and the conversations that different racial groups are having about rights being infringed. So you have the protests talking about it would be nice if you would finally stop killing us. That would be great. And then you have the mask protests, where if Publix makes me wear a mask, that is the greatest infringement on my rights imaginable. I should be allowed to spread a deadly illness. And if you stop me, you are a Nazi.
I really, you know what, and especially when people bring out the Constitution, and I'm like, you know what, the Constitution's got that whole, like, I don't know, life, liberty kind of stuff going on. So that's like group number one, trying to get that whole, we just want to keep our lives. And I am not aware of any part of the Constitution, and maybe I missed that day in law school, that said, you know, Publix can't regulate what I wear when I enter this private establishment. And it's wild that so many people will try to weaponize or point to the Constitution, a document that they've never read or tried to interpret in any way, in order to justify them not following the rules. Yeah. It's awesome.
Yeah. Just ridiculous. Okay, let's continue, see if we can come up with why he's down to 37%. One reason potentially is that we have been waiting for the federal government, obviously led by Donald Trump, to do something about the fact that cases are rising so precipitously in a number of different states, and they have done something. They are ending funding for community-based COVID test sites, most of them being in Texas. Now, look, you just see that headline and you think, okay, well, that sounds bad. But maybe they're not needed because Texas is doing really well in the pandemic. No. Up to almost 6,000 cases a day. That's where, like, now, admittedly, California is really high too. Slightly higher than that. But California is a lot bigger than Texas. Both of these states being hit so hard. And their move is to slow down the testing. What he implied jokingly he was going to do at his rally in Tulsa.
Exactly. And it's the thing that also gets me so much about Texas is like having Ted Cruz go out and get his little haircut and just say, we're good, we don't need to do this. And then now you have this spike and the federal funding is going to be withdrawn for these test centers. And you're out here now complaining, pushing back, saying it's wrong. We need funding for the test centers. Oh man, it just continues to be this cyclical element of just stupidity, active, egregious stupidity. And one thing that definitely, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, that gets me though, is, okay, so we have New York, Connecticut, New Jersey imposing fines for people who don't quarantine for 14 days after coming in. And like it's $2,000 for the first violation. I loathe the idea of any kind of set fines because you're going to, again, have that class of people who have the money and do not care. And so I don't know. I always love the idea of the fine being in proportion to maybe your income. And so because, hey, that might deter people where $2,000 otherwise isn't anything. Do you think that'd be worthwhile to get these people who think they are above the law to act right?
Yeah. I mean, look, I don't know exactly how you institute the scaling, but something like that has to happen because you're not even proposing a hypothetical. Trump has already said, I'm not going to do it. Find me if you want. Like it's already demonstrated exactly what you're saying. And yeah, so I get that they're going to have a fine, but think about this. You have a set fine that is going to hit people with the least resources hardest. Those people are already most exposed to the virus and already have the hardest time financing travel across the country. Yeah. It needs to be modified.
Absolutely.
I think you're 100% right. So one additional thing that I do want to throw onto here, especially as we're talking about, the rise in cases in these individual states, the rise in cases overall. If somebody watching this watches every day, I apologize. I know that I've been saying this literally every day, but while there's been a lot of misinformation that has had to be knocked down over the past few months, the most recent is the idea that the only reason cases are going up is because we're testing more. That is not the case. And every day I try to come up a new explanation for why that isn't the case. Here we've got a good one from covidtracking.org or .com that shows the percent change in a variety of different states of cases and tests over a 1 week period. And you can see that in the 4 states to the left, you have Arizona, Texas, Georgia, and California, testing did go up, but cases went up far faster. And in 3 states, Kentucky, Florida, and South Carolina, cases went up, including nearly 70% in Florida alone, while testing rates actually dropped. So that is not an explanation for why the cases are going up. It never was. It was certainly never an explanation for why hospitalizations are going up. The only silver lining is that so far deaths have not started to rise.
Yes.
But we also know that there's a 1 to 2 week lag in this, and so that theoretically could be coming in the near future.
Absolutely. And it's just this whole notion that if we don't test, we won't have increases in rates is kind of like, you can't see me, I'm not here. It's just so stupid.
Yeah.
And it's really sad, but we see the same thing going on in Brazil and these leaders who just engage in absolute shenanigans to our detriment.
And I know I've been saying this since the very beginning. It seems like if your whole thing is going to be presenting yourself as the strong man, the person who's actually going to defend the silent majority that's been forgotten by the elites and all that, don't you have to stop them from dying in mass numbers? Like, if you can't do that, what's the point of having the strong man? But they've figured out a way. They've, through the power of Fox News and right-wing media, they have convinced their base that even as they're dying, it's fake. It's not actually happening. You can ignore it. I know that you know someone who died, but they didn't actually die. Those numbers are inflated and all that. It's been an amazing coup of propaganda that they've been able to get done in the past few months.
No, absolutely. And then what scares me most is having these borders around us being shut down. And then those whispers that the EU is not going to allow Americans in. Because part of me is like, nah, I got to get out of here. I need the option if I can go somewhere. But so many nations are just they're not going to welcome us because we essentially didn't act right. And also, they didn't really like us anyways.
Yeah, that's true. And yeah, I know that like it's imminent that Trump is going to attack the EU for that. But can you blame him? Like, they're trying to stop infections from spiking again. Why would, unless they were to institute an Australia-style, forced 14-day quarantine or something like that, why would you allow Americans or Brazilians or Russians, any people from countries where the cases are rapidly rising once again? I mean, you can't risk it. It is literally a life and death choice.
Yep, and they can probably also see, essentially, maybe it was kind of this America's mentality of we don't want immigrants to come here, have babies and stay, that kind of thing. They can already see how the United States is breaking down and they don't want us to go there, have babies and stay. And so I think they're just like, nah, we good. We'll see you when we see you. We'll watch from here. But no, you people can't come. And it's unfortunate. I really think we were doing something good and we were moving in the right direction. And now the pendulum is swinging right on back and it's slapping us all in the face.
Exactly. And insult to injury, they're not going to admit that they were wrong. All the calls to reopen and you don't need the masks and social distancing isn't necessary and all the stuff that Fox News has been spreading on a daily basis. Sean Hannity is not going to stare into the camera and say, I have to admit I got it wrong. And people are dying, and I admit that it's not going to happen. Anyway, why don't we turn to a little bit of good news very quickly before we wrap up our coronavirus coverage. So as the protests developed in cities across the country week by week. Some people, in an incredibly fake way, called out those protests as being, a really bad idea because hypothetically they could spur more coronavirus infections. Some people were legitimately concerned about the safety of protesters, particularly with pervasive footage of cops not wearing masks and getting right in the face of protesters. Obviously, that's a risk. Some people used it in a very politically biased way to try to nullify and negate the concerns of the protesters. But we have been waiting since then to find out, are we going to see a rise in coronavirus cases in places where these protests were their largest? And we don't have data from across the country just yet, but in New York City, we apparently are not seeing evidence that it was, a stimulus for more coronavirus. The city's daily COVID-19 indicators, cases, hospitalizations, and deaths in June have steadily declined to levels last seen in early March, when the city hadn't yet shut down. You can see here daily case counts continuing to trend down. And this is while we've seen cases rising sharply in a number of other states that didn't necessarily have the pervasive protests, but did have people that forsook wearing masks and reopened prematurely and all of that. So, Adrienne, we can't say for sure exactly what's going to happen, but this certainly seems like good news.
Oh, absolutely. I think there were probably more people hospitalized by police brutality from these protests than there were from people for COVID-19. And that also speaks a lot to our system. But, I do think a lot of people were afraid that being out there, being in close contact. But I do believe that the people who were advancing in the protests were also being pretty mindful of wearing masks and staying at a distance to a certain extent, of course. But, I think it's a really good sign. But it also speaks volumes to the areas where we're having this increase in the fact that they are not regarding any of the COVID-19 safety measures. And they really have no excuse.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, I agree with the protests, the distance thing was going to be rough. But look, I saw a lot of footage, and universally, the mask wearing was almost universal. I guess not to repeat myself, but and we shouldn't be surprised by that. In the same way that if you go to a Trump rally and you bizarrely think that you should wear a mask, do it and see what the other people at the Trump rally say to you. Conversely, if you go to the protests and you're not wearing a mask, there's going to be a different sort of social pressure to not risk infecting people around you with a virus. So there's like this virtuous circle of once you have enough acceptance of the science, it spurs other people to do it. And that's why this is good news, but I don't find it to be particularly shocking. These people were being incredibly serious and responsible when it came to the pandemic, while also knowing that they can't miss an opportunity to, engage democratically, fight for their rights, draw attention to important issues, and all of that.
Absolutely. And it's so funny, too. Just kind of the irony, the thought that you have people at Trump rallies not wearing a mask, but these are also the kind of people who are notorious for wearing hoods. So it's just really, I don't know, it's something, it kind of sits with me, or I'm like, really, yo? So now you don't want to cover your face? Oh, that's fun. Okay.
Exactly. And by the way, you mentioned the possibility that more people might, in fact, be in the hospital as a result of the rampant police brutality we saw, in no small part in New York, by the way. Some of the most brutal acts with using their SUVs to try to run over people and all of that. We have coming earlier this week, late Tuesday night, the city's health department quietly released a report showing that the number of fatalities at the hands of the police was more than double what had been previously reported between 2010 and 2015, and the vast majority of unarmed people killed at the hands of the police were Black and Latino.
Sounds right.
Sounds right. Tragic, but not that surprising.
No.
Okay, before we turn to other news, let's see a little bit of what's been going on in the super chats. Okay, let's see. I want to make sure that especially, so usually I try to catch up after the show, and so ones that aren't that are especially targeted to you, I want to make sure that you hear. Let's see. West Crosby says, "Great to see you, Adrienne."
Ah, hello.
And then says, "Hey John, good to see you too, I guess." Great, thanks. Joseph Laundry saying Booker took the lead in Kentucky by 3,000 votes. Yeah, I noticed that this morning. It doesn't seem like, I guess because we're still waiting to find out and there's 5 days until the full count, people are trying not to get overly excited, but once he took the lead, it didn't seem like it spurred the sort of attention that I thought it would have. Charles Massey says, "Yo, Adrienne," in Rocky voice. She is awesome.
Dang.
Hanny Banani says, so happy to see AL on TDR. She is such an inspiration to me, and I look forward to her thoughtful commentary. Awesome. Kai Allen says, from one professional black woman to another, I see you, Adrienne, and love you.
Thank you.
The POC, man, there's not a lot of super chats targeted directly at me. You really seem to be taking the majority of their focus. Let's see. The POC People of Color says, goodness, Adrienne is so lovely and intelligent. Wonderful to receive her commentary. Can we have her on TDR every Thursday?
Oh, that's sweet of you. Thank you.
Let's see. And JSS says, please don't forget that mask compliance went way down after Trump stopped the daily briefings from Fauci and Birx. Yeah. Yeah, and but of course that was at the same time that Fox was every day was telling them the masks aren't necessary. God, what a massive failure of a country from top to bottom.
Exactly. Oh, completely. It's so, unfortunately, it's become the American way.
Yeah. This entire year. Okay, with that, let's jump to something very different. Okay. Things are, at least for the near term, looking a little bit brighter for the legal prospects of Michael Flynn, formerly of the Trump administration, with the announcement that U.S. District Judge Emmett Sullivan must immediately dismiss the criminal case against President Trump's former National Security Advisor, Michael Flynn, and cannot scrutinize the Justice Department's decision to drop the long-running prosecution. That was ruled by a federal appeals court just yesterday. In a 2-1 decision, the court said it is not within the judge's power to prolong a prosecution or examine the government's motives in the politically charged case. So I am going to turn this over to Adrienne. You are the legal expert. How significant is this ruling?
Okay, so first off, like, all of this is total legal porn, so I am so excited about it. Yes. So this ruling is extremely significant, and as John had mentioned, it's a 2-1 decision, and it was 2 GOP-appointed judges who ruled, and the dissenting, of course, I believe is an Obama appointee. But essentially, the important thing we have here is that the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, so the Court of Appeals in D.C., went ahead and they jumped a few steps. Mm-hmm. They didn't let District Court Judge Emmett Sullivan actually rule or decide on the matter, because that's generally what happens before you can ask the Court of Appeals to do something. You need a ruling from the district court, and that was not given here. So now the situation is that Judge Sullivan has stayed the case, and he's either going to petition for review en banc, meaning he's going to ask the entire Court of Appeals, all the judges that are seated, to re-review the decision that came out yesterday, or using the powers that be, he's just going to sit on it. And because I used to clerk at the D.C. Court of Appeals for the chief judge there. And so judges can do all sorts of things with cases based on their docket. You know, the legal system works on its own timing and schedule. So we'll see how it goes. But this is, there's a lot of flexing. And Sullivan is flexing hard. And the Court of Appeals really is out of pocket.
See, this is the difficult position. So I don't have, obviously I don't have the legal knowledge that you have. I certainly don't have the specific experience with this court. Like, so I can read about potential directions that this could go in, but I don't have the contextual knowledge to say what the likelihood of any particular path is. And so I understand that I'm trying to figure out how likely it is that Michael Flynn might effectively be done. This entire process might be closed out for him. If not, when will we know? Is there the possibility that Trump, who seems to have been trying to influence this thing from the outside, might just directly pardon him? I'm curious what you think the next, say, 6 months or so might look like for this case.
Okay, so right now the issue with Flynn is that the next move will be by Judge Sullivan. He's going to have to decide if he's going to ask the Court of Appeals, all of them, to review things, which would be en banc. So that's like the whole court decides. Or if he's going to use his powers as a judge to kind of just not do anything and let the case sit. And the thing is because, you know, we had Flynn pleading guilty twice to pretty much lying to the FBI about his Russian contacts, and DOJ wanted to dismiss the charges. So we don't have that full on hard conviction yet that Trump could actually go ahead and pardon. So essentially, the person with the most power right now is Judge Sullivan. And so I could see him petitioning en banc, and the DC Circuit Court of Appeals. So the Court of Appeals there is, I think it's a majority Democratic appointed judges, and you only need a certain number of judges to agree to have it reviewed en banc. And so I could really see this going back to the Court of Appeals to re-review it, because the reality is that these, three judges in this small little decision that came out yesterday, again, they jumped a step. And procedure is the most important thing in the court system. And so to not even let Sullivan make the decision initially is problematic. And so this is going to be such an important decision, because everything about it that came out yesterday, it speaks to corruption, all of it. Corruption, the fact that you're willing to not make Flynn follow the rules. Because regardless of the outcome, you've got to follow the rules to get there. And so it's problematic.
So I want to get your opinion on something that I've expressed my thoughts about for quite a while now. So as you said, he pleaded guilty twice to lying. The response from the very beginning from the right has been, this doesn't count. In fact, no lying in any of these investigations counts, because it's just the result of a perjury trap. What do you think about that argument?
I think it's nonsense. The problem is, again, we have a society that has enjoyed certain people and living without accountability, being able to lie and never having to really face the music. And so the thought that he lied, I can understand the right, and also just most powerful people, regardless of political party, being like shoulder shrugs. We essentially lie all the time. To hold us accountable for it, that's blasphemy. So, the reality that we're going to hold people accountable for their behavior is very new. And we see this right now in this recent Black Lives Matter uprising, with some people really being called to task. But there's still really this ideology among a large segment of our community that they should never be held accountable for what they do.
Yeah.
And I see that.
So maybe I can get your response to this. As a result of this decision, Flynn called into Rush Limbaugh's radio show and called it, the decision, a great boost of confidence for the American people and our justice system. So my initial reaction was not the same as Michael Flynn's. When I see this, and when I see apparently one of the prosecutors in the Roger Stone case saying that the Trump administration had been putting pressure on them to give him as minimal a sentence as possible, and even now the possibility that he could pardon Roger Stone looms large over that case. How would you characterize your confidence in our justice system under this administration?
Yikes. I do not have confidence in our justice system at all. I do think that the last bastion of hope would be our courts. Unfortunately, Trump has appointed more federal judges, I think, than any other president. And the vast majority of them have been privileged white men who are hyper unqualified, much like Trump himself. And so that is going to have a significant impact on all Americans as these decisions get put out that do not comport with the law, do not make sense, and really undermine the entire system we built. And our system was already very broken to begin with. But the law was really the last bastion of hope. And it's where I put a lot of my love and passion, because when you understand how it's supposed to work, it's very tough to watch it all be dismantled, and for people to just willy-nilly do whatever they want to serve their friends. So yes, that might have been a soapbox of woe is me. I'm just like, it's exhausting. And it's interesting because attorneys have a high alcoholism rate. And one of the reasons I've always suspected that to be the case is because you know how the system should work. And you watch it be broken all the time. But at this level, it's insane. Yeah, man.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw, they just confirmed Trump's 200th federal judge. I don't know much about the individual. I've seen him, shockingly, it's a man, him described as a voting rights extremist, like an anti-voting rights extremist. And that's the thing, like, I think about, like, hypothetically, let's say that Trump loses in November or whatever. That's 200 landmines waiting to go off in cases stretching decades into the future.
That's right. And these individuals, they serve for life. Like they don't have anywhere to go, so they can do just about anything they want. And the only check they have would be the courts above them, where Trump has already stacked other people in those spots. And so this is incredibly problematic. And the only thing we can really count on, which we all know they don't do anything really, is Congress. Because Congress is the one that can actually impeach a federal judge. But otherwise, nothing is going to happen. And these people are going to be here until their, last breath is taken. Mm-hmm. And it is just mesmerizing to how much damage this man was able to do in 4 years. If he has another 4, nah, I don't know. I can't help you. I'm going to have to swim across some ocean to get somewhere else because I can't do this.
Well, quick question. You know a lot more about potential judges that could be, given promotions in your future. So who do you think he would replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg with?
Jesus Christ.
What conservative gargoyle?
Exactly. And the thing is you don't even need to be a lawyer to be on the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. You want someone with a legal mind, but he could appoint one of his kids, like as long as the Senate is good with it, and that's a very, very scary thing. But he will find someone who really speaks to his ignorance and ideology, and is likely a racist rapist. And the thing is, it's like with Scalia, I respected Scalia because his principles were his principles. He wasn't necessarily trying to, feed the system and to do hands off for friends. Like he really believed what he said. Like him and RBG were besties. But like the judges they're putting on now, it's like you've got no professional anything. Like Kavanaugh is a joke. It's a frat boy. Get out of here.
Yeah, I don't know about you. I'm holding out for Judge Jeanine Pirro. I think that she's ready to do it. You wanted someone who speaks to his ignorance. She speaks to his ignorance with ignorance. So that's just perfect. Of course, he'll probably just end up going with some like 24-year-old activist in Talking Points USA or something like that. Just put whoever you want on there.
And it's like, oh man. And I actually feel bad for the other judges. Like the other, not the other full 8. I don't feel bad for Kavanaugh. But it's kind of like when you've been a legal mind, it's an intellectualism. Like it's just, there's something sexy about being able to spar, even if you have a complete difference of opinion, but you can't spar with an everyday idiot. And just to think of how hard you work to get there, and then that man shows up, get out of here. Nah, yeah. I'd be so angry.
Okay, let's touch base with super chats and comments for just a minute before we move on to other news. Let's see. The Sing in the Left says, Adrienne on first-time singer on TDR. Did you see that Karen Bass is being vetted as a potential VP pick? I don't know if you saw that.
Interesting. No, I did not. I've been on the show with you.
Exactly. Let's see. Brent Anderson says, always liked her on TYT. Very thoughtful points.
Oh, thank you.
Let's see.
Karen Bass, I see.
Def Tourette says, I'm learning so much from Adrienne. I love my sisters.
Haha. Nice.
Okay. And Miranda has a question. Does Adrienne watch Legal Eagle?
I don't. I don't know of it, but I'd like to know more about it, and I will Google it.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't familiar with it either. I thought maybe some sort of legal true crime drama or something like that. I wasn't sure.
Now, I've generally avoided most of like those kind of shows because it's like a doctor watching ER and going, what the hell? You can't do that. And so like even me watching Law and Order, I'm just like, there are never any surprise witnesses. Make it stop. It's one of those where it's ruined a lot of TV.
Yeah.
When you just know too much, you're like, I can't roll.
Yeah, I was shocked to find out, because I'm a big fan of House, I was shocked that some doctors find the medicine to be unconvincing.
Really?
I know. It's weird, but they nitpick,
I couldn't imagine watching that stuff.
Karanig says, Devin Nunes lost his lawsuit against the cow. Yeah, he
lost his
against a fictional bovine. I don't
And the thing is,
it.
he got kicked out on a motion to dismiss. That's like the first rung. And part of me is like, the law was already well settled on this point in terms of you trying to hold Twitter responsible. So it just, the man, he didn't have a leg to stand on, and he's just nonsense, wasting people's time.
Yeah. Okay, well, with that, why don't we jump back into the news? 2 more big stories to get to at the very least. So let's do this. Here is a There's a tragic, scary one. A little bit of Black Mirror, like an episode coming in real life. Let's talk about a man, Robert Julian Borshak Williams, who is just the latest individual to run afoul of the incredibly racially discriminatory face recognition software that is spreading across America and law enforcement to virtually everything it's being used now. So effectively what happened is at one point, some theft had happened, some shoplifting of a few watches of a few $1,000s. And here is how it ended up roping in Robert Julian Borshak Williams. Investigators pulled a security video that had recorded an incident of shoplifting. Like I said, detectives zoomed in on the grainy footage and ran the person who appeared to be the suspect through facial recognition software. A hit came back about 25 miles northwest of Detroit. Then in January, police pulled up to Williams' home and arrested him while he stood on his front lawn in front of his wife and two daughters, aged 2 and 5, who cried as they watched their father being placed in the patrol call. As he's being arrested, his wife, Melissa Williams, wanted to know where police were taking her husband. One of the cops told her, Google it, which is just amazing. So he gets hauled in, and bear in mind, he didn't do anything wrong, and he's trying to convince these people that the grainy little security camera footage, great lenses they use on those, by the way, is not actually him. He says that in one interview, he held up a photo of the shoplifter next to his own face, after which one of the detectives said the computer must have gotten it wrong, which sounds like it should have been the end of the entire thing, but wasn't. The second piece of paper that they had was a close-up. The photo was blurry, but obviously not Mr. Williams. He picked up the image and held it next to his face and said, "No, this is not me. You think all black men look alike." And the issue, obviously, is that whether that cop did, the facial recognition definitely does. And so this has been so well demonstrated to see a person who was held for 30 hours when it was abundantly clear from the first look at the photo that it wasn't him. This is American law enforcement and tech.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the thing is, it's like a lot of people don't appreciate the fact that so many of these companies out here, especially tech, when they're making this facial recognition, it's a bunch of white people sitting in a room.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they can't fully appreciate black features and the differences in them. And even we have studies showing that eyewitness testimony that is interracial is very unreliable.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have facial recognition, it's not good because it can't tell the difference between me and Nina Simone.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and as a result of that, cops are essentially weaponizing it as an excuse to give us a record, you know? And that's the thing of how does that impact you when you are sitting there like this man, 30 hours? Like, what if it took them years to figure it out? What if you had to actually wage a full defense? You lose your job, your money, your income, your family, your house. Mm-hmm. How do these people get away with this? And you have absolutely no recourse whatsoever. All they say is, oops.
Yeah. Yeah, and only because people make a big deal out of the case do they eventually scrub it entirely from your record. Initially, when they released him, like, I don't know all the technicalities, but they theoretically could have brought him back in. Like, they weren't even fundamentally legally recognizing how wrong they had gotten it. And even if they hadn't done that, they hauled this guy away in front of his family in public. That is damaging in and of itself. Mm-hmm. And so, and I love that you mentioned
accused of something you did not do. Mm-hmm. And also, police have had a legacy of saying, "Oh, well, you look like someone who committed the crime," just as a way to harass you. Mm-hmm. Like it's well known. And so it's just a way to continue to police us when we are living our everyday lives, and essentially just to power struggle, have fun, persecute. It's terrible.
And what I don't understand is, do they not want to actually catch the person that broke the law? Like,
no.
If you are harassing other people, you are fundamentally not getting any closer to actually solving the crime. That seems like not a good outcome for police, but they seem to be okay with it.
Yeah, no, police like to use their means and their power, not necessarily to do their job, as opposed to engage in power plays. And, you know, we all work in places. We see that same thing where you have a boss who is clearly not focused on doing the job as much as it is putting you in your place. Mm-hmm. So police love to do power exercises because the reality is they're still going to have a job even when they don't solve the crime.
Yeah.
So they don't care. Get out of here.
That's true. I'm glad you mentioned too that before this, and still obviously when you have witness testimony, that they get it wrong too. The thing is, while those people probably never get in trouble, hypothetically someone made a mistake. The way they've got it set up now with the computers, nobody made a mistake. It's just a computer. It's just an algorithm. Nobody did anything wrong. It's an amazing system that they've set up.
I definitely think tech got it wrong in the fact that they have no diversity whatsoever and they just don't give a damn.
Yeah.
And then police departments, same thing, to continue to enjoy that liberty, because they don't do any cross checks, because they don't care if it ends up ruining your life because you're black.
Yeah. And just to be clear, they have gotten it wrong from the very beginning. I mean that they have sort of escaped culpability, that it has now been distributed. But yeah, the entire thing, and it's not like nobody saw it coming. People have been raising concerns about this for so long and getting attacked for doing so. I still remember, maybe people remember, we talked about this on the damage report. It was last year, AOC, at one of these meetings with tech leaders, talked about racial discrimination in facial recognition, and she was roundly ridiculed by the right. Oh, AOC thinks laptops are racist. That's seriously the attacks that were waged against her. She was right then, and she's only being proven more right with every passing day.
Yes. And at least a quarter of the nation's law enforcement agencies have access to these facial recognition tools. And again, when I was younger, someone accused me of looking like someone that they said committed a crime, was dealing drugs or something. Mm-hmm. And just to be accused of something you didn't do, but also because I was just this little perfect straight arrow, straight A kind of kid. It's so incredibly emotionally damaging when authorities just are willing to point a finger without even doing the due diligence of making sure that it's not you.
Yeah.
Or that it is actually you, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah, you would like to imagine that the people that we vest with the most power over life and death, literally, would have just the slightest bit of care for your fundamental humanity to want to make sure that it's actually you before they harm you, perhaps irreparably.
Exactly. But since they have qualified immunity, and again, they're not going to lose their job if they don't even do their job, it's complete and total, irrevocable, just power. Yeah. And it's so dangerous for those of us at the bottom of the totem pole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's turn to our last story here. Let's talk about Lobster. I did not expect that we would, but thanks to Donald Trump, that's what's on our plate today as a country. He tweeted yesterday, President Obama destroyed the lobster and fishing industry in Maine. Now it's back, bigger and better than anyone ever thought possible. Enjoy your lobstering and fishing. You could just write lobstering. We get what you mean with the lobstering. We don't think, oh, dress up like a lobster. No, you're catching lobster. We get what you don't need to put it in. Anyway, make lots of money. So why is he saying this? Why is the most powerful individual in the entire world talking about lobster? Well, it's because he was directing the Department of Agriculture to extend the more than $30 billion bailout fund that they put together as a sort of response to the trade war that Donald Trump launched us into for no reason, to now include the lobster industry, rather than things like soybeans and all of that. And so they're going to be providing some of that to lobster fishermen, especially in Maine, who have been harmed by the trade war with China. Now, important context for this conversation. After Trump imposed tariffs on a wide range of Chinese products back in 2018, Beijing responded with a 25% levy on $34 billion worth of U.S. goods, which included American lobster. And as a result of that, Maine's lobster business found a ton of new work supplying China. That has harmed Maine lobsters. And Trump is saying, something about Obama. He ruined it. I'm good, though. What do you think about this?
I think that I'm probably still a little poor to afford lobster, but I remember what it tastes like, and that's nice. Uh-huh. But in terms of this story, you know what? It's just unfortunate that there are so many people out there who are impacted by Trump's ignorance, because like you said, he got us into this nonsense trade war and then creating this $30 billion bailout program to compensate these farmers and whatnot. And the fact is that people are also disgruntled about even this bailout because it seems he's really directing it to states that can help him. And Maine being a swing state, they're going to get as much funding as they need while a lot of other states kind of sit and suffer. And it's all started from his kind of, ignorance and really just misdeeds, and everybody's going to suffer.
I'm curious. So I think you're probably right for the reason. I think the fact that a lot of the money had already gone to Midwest states that are going to be competitive, the fact that he's suddenly interested in Maine, like, has he said the word Maine since he became president before this? I don't know.
Does he know where Maine is?
Can he point it out on a map? I don't know. The only other potential explanation I can think of is because he is such a small, simple person in some ways. He had a trip to Maine and talked to some of these lobster fishermen not long ago. It was like less than a month ago, I think. And actually, are you familiar with Sarah Cooper, who does the Trump impersonations? So she had an amazing one of Trump on how to lobster. It's great. You should go watch it, everybody. But so he sat down with some of these lobster fishermen, and they were telling him about how bad it is. And so he started riffing about the EU and China. And he's the sort of person that, like, he would get so focused on that he would suddenly turn, like, the power and might of the U.S. government to dealing with it. So I don't know if it's the weird idiosyncrasies of him being such a weirdo, or likely you're right that it's a political calculation. But anyway, whatever it is, it's a needless expense. If he hadn't started the trade war, we wouldn't need to spend tens of billions of dollars bailing out so many different industries.
Exactly. And what having Beijing responding with a 25% levy on, I think it was like $34 billion worth of U.S. goods.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, I don't know. It's like, this is exactly who this man is. And it's why we are in trouble and why we are isolated and people aren't able to generate their income. Because, unfortunately, he stoked this mentality of a lot of Americans of the thought, we're a world power. We don't need anybody else. When no, it's a very symbiotic relationship. Mm-hmm. We need everyone else and they need us. But unfortunately, now they're telling us, nah, we don't need you, son. And it's not a good look.
I want to get your opinion. So it's election year, obviously. Trump needs to win re-election. I would say going into 2020, it looked really good for him. But he's had so many of these, like, own goals, like continuing the trade war that's hurting the U.S. economy while trying to convince his base, this is me being strong. The coronavirus absolutely devastates us. He tries to get people to forget that it's actually happening. The economy is going to be hurt even more when the lockdowns have to come back because he didn't take it seriously. Like, what do you think going into this general election about his strategy, these constant self-destructive policies? Do you think he's going to be able to surpass the effect of them and win re-election?
The thing is, I think that the loyal aspect of his base will forever be loyal. And there's nothing that he could do that will make those people not believe in him. I think you said, 37% approval rate. So that like base isn't going to go anywhere. For anyone else who is questioning or kind of teetering on the fence or whatnot, I think these next few months that he's going to continue to hurt himself because unfortunately, as much as we were kind of like coming at Biden for being kind of quiet through a lot of this, it's probably for the best that Biden remained quiet.
It's looking like that.
Otherwise, he could just, only hurt himself as opposed to letting Trump do his own damage to his own self. So it's just, I think that Trump will continue to do damage, but he's always going to have that loyal base. But the thing is, also feel like a lot of people will say that they don't back Trump, but then would go into a voting booth and go ahead and vote for him because they, prefer white supremacy more.
Yeah.
So I really don't know what to think, but I feel like I'm completely and totally traumatized by the last 4 years.
And you certainly don't sound like you're just coasting into the election anyway. And you might have answered this here. I'm curious, the 30%, 31, 37, whatever it is, if over 100,000 people dying from coronavirus doesn't get through to them, if him needlessly hurting the economy, including industries that are like overwhelmingly in red states, what is the core that it's resting on? Is it just the racism? Is it the racist dog whistles and the constant taking it back to that and the culture war stuff and all of that? Do you think that's sort of the foundation that it's resting on?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. People don't realize how powerful that is because, one of the important components of white supremacy is also the patriarchy and male supremacy. And so people don't realize, number one, the vast majority of us in this world, well, especially white America, has built their identity on this this kind of notion of superiority, whether it's explicit or implicit. You're used to being talked to a certain way. For instance, there is a wonderful company that I'm working with right now where I was hosting the videos, but now they brought me in as a consultant to go over, maybe racial elements and let them know. And so I'm having a very candid conversation with the older white male CEO, and he asked me for the truth. So I gave him the real, and he said, no one's ever spoken to me this way. And I wasn't insulting him in any form or fashion, but the fact that I was just completely and totally direct and candid, because there is this unfortunate aspect of our society where people have been shielded from a lot of the truth, and also they haven't necessarily been treated the way the rest of us are treated and getting the real. They've been coddled to a certain extent. And a lot of our population wants to keep it that way.
Yeah.
And so I think that is extremely important for a number of people who really support his base, even if it will mean that you lose money, that you financially and economically suffer. And there's been a lot of research on this too, because the reality is that people need to feel like they're better than someone.
Yeah.
And and it doesn't just have to be race, it can be gender, it can be all sorts of things. But people would even take less money in their paycheck as long as it meant that they are still making more than the person next to them.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, Adrienne, those are our stories. But before you go, I wanted to let people know you have a book. Can you tell us about Staying in the Game?
All right. So I wrote Staying in the Game, the playbook for beating workplace sexual harassment, because most people don't know what sexual harassment is, but it definitely impacts men and women, and you need a strategy for it. Because again, especially right now with a lot of these uprisings and push to, hey, distribute the power, there's going to be a lot of people out there who are going to want to kind of get the power back. And so they're going to use workplace sexual harassment to get to you, which is a lot of come-ons and put-downs and marginalizing you. And so it's a first of its kind because no one's ever put anything out there like that for fear of retaliation. And I'm out here like, whatever. Like, nah, people need to know what the score is. Let's do this. Yeah. So yeah, that's good. And a lot of people seem to like it a lot, which is neat.
Awesome. That is great. Adrienne, thank you so much for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you.
Have a good day and stay safe out there, especially with coronavirus spreading as fast as it is in California right now.
Seriously.
Okay, we'll talk soon. Everyone else, let's see what's been going on with the super chats. We had a lot of news we wanted to fit in, so apologies for putting it off to the end for the most part, but here we go. Linda Mitchell saying Matt Gaetz is a broken tool, pass it on. Chub Toad saying Matt Gaetz and Jim Jordan are both tools. Could Jim Jordan someday eclipse Matt Gaetz? We'll have to stay tuned and find out. Rob Shively says, happy birthday. Matt Gaetz is a tool, and can your new nickname be Barracuda? Half angry fish, half angry bear. Is it here to hunt us? Is it here to save us? Thank you, Rob. I will try to make it spread. It would be a cool t-shirt. Matt Cream says, when will the first Dragon Squad mixtape drop? Everybody in the chat, guess how many years it's been since I made a mixtape. I mean, even just putting together a mix of other songs, let alone, obviously, I've never done any music of my own. Vixen says, John, you are by far my favorite TYT host, and your show is the rock that keeps me sane. I revel in the fact that you're every bit as much of a nerd as I am, and all in the same ways. Thank you all for all that you do. Hi, Adrienne. Thank you, Vixen. Thank you. In terms of, by the way, the reference to the nerd, I forget now who it was yesterday that said something about I should change my background. Well, am I not merciful? All new games being highlighted here. You can see some Outer Rim, some Clank, Champions of Midgard. Anyway, Jake says, would you or have you ever have David Pakman on your show? I obviously would. I don't think that I have. So here's the issue with a number, and this isn't specific to David Pakman. A lot of shows film at the same time as my show, which makes it shockingly difficult to have those people on. It's one of the reasons Michael Brooks has been only on a couple times. We've had to shoot like later in the day and hold the episode to play, which obviously is tough with news. Like, it's breaking news, you want to get to it. And the same with a few others as well. It's been one of the problems with Mark Thompson too. So certainly a possibility. Melly Bean says, my 3-year-old dancing to the opening TDR theme was my happiness today. That's awesome. It has now become my happiness. Feisty Fan says, people can't handle being mildly inconvenienced, and a mask is about as mild an inconvenience as possible. Paris says, happy B-Day to you. Live safe, you and your family. Don't forget to feed the cat, 3 dogs, 1 cow, and the 3 elephants in the cellar. I might be messing with you a little. Love from Sweden. Thank you. That would be awesome. A little baby elephant would be cool. Rage of the Animal says, very scary, you're right. Yes. Texas closing down once again, or at least stopping the reopening. John Chavez says, me and my girl haven't been feeling good, found out that we've both been exposed at work, went to a few test sites, and all out of tests. Cases are exploding here, and Trump is scaling back the testing. I assume that is Texas, with the scaling back the testing. Stay safe. David Covert says, look, you know what else is uncomfortable? Pants. But I wear them. Not for me, but for you. Hashtag wear the freaking mask. Exactly. Charlie says, punishable by fine equals legal for the rich. 100%. Yeah, that's what Adrienne been saying. Tori says, I'm so angry by the way the MSM reports the increase in COVID cases when they just casually toss in testing has also gone up. No, just look at percent of positive cases. It's not going down, it's going up. Yes. In some cases, it's going down, in some states, but in the states that are getting hard hit, the positivity rate is also going up. That's another piece of evidence that it isn't just the increased testing that can account for it. Shelly Burgess says, prayers to you in California, John, from Maine. Wish we would have hit COVID with a hammer before we opened. Exactly. But you guys in Maine, you've been busy with what Obama did to your lobster industry. Thank you. Sketchy Mom Fleming says XXOO. Thank you, Sketchy Mom Fleming. That is only mildly sketchy. Thank you. Shelley says, I plan to vote for Biden, but still can't help being super disappointed with his presence virtually or otherwise throughout these crises. It's fine for Dems to criticize Trump, but where are his efforts to push Congress? You are only 100% right. And Adrienne and I were sort of talking about that. Like, no, look, does Biden talk more than I cover? Yes, because for the most part, I find his talks to be not particularly newsworthy, not particularly interesting. But yeah, it is mostly a strategy of hiding, still, even at this point. Okay, trying to keep the chat usable. Verena says, I love you guys, but being European, I have to say, please stay away, or accept a 2-week quarantine upon arrival. We just about have a handle on it. Don't need plague-ridden hordes messing it up. Verena, I understand. Miss Given says, my first opportunity to see Adrienne, psyched to get her perspective, and what a beautiful smile. Number 2, Matt Gates is a tool. Number 3, John's awesome too. Thank you. Everybody remember when Matt Gaetz wore a gas mask on the floor of the House to make fun of the fear that people had over coronavirus? That was funny. Gemmo, if I'm remembering correctly, I'm trying to remember correctly, says, protests in New Orleans attracted thousands of people and almost everyone was wearing a mask. Result, no corona clusters traced back to the protests. Thank you for that update. Yeah, exactly. So we focused on the New York thing because it was very sort of easy to digest, but I will be looking at other places. Thank you for filling me in. Derluke says, wasn't Al Capone caught on tax evasion or something? Flynn caught on perjury to stop wider crimes does not feel that different. Exactly. iRock and Iadarola says, Johnny, you're indeed the man. Thank you. Artana says, does Flynn deserve to be prosecuted in the first place, though? They had the transcripts and the case would have been closed without those FBI agents. Look, I don't know. And I will say what I've said virtually from the beginning whenever Michael Flynn comes up. I don't care about Michael Flynn. I certainly no longer care about Michael Flynn. But he did lie. Why? Like, you don't randomly lie to the FBI. Anyway, but again, I want to reiterate, I don't care. Gina says, Legal YouTube channel, see Glenn Kirshner. Thank you. Gina Jones says, does Adrienne have any pets? I wish I'd seen that. I actually don't know. Chris Riddle says, what? Stopped funding to testing? Yeah, he did. Miranda says, he's a real lawyer in DC who answers people's questions, reviews legal movies. He has a channel like this one. Oh, that's interesting. I wonder if he'd be a good guest. Dave says, Adrienne Legal, real Washington lawyer, YouTube channel, really good. A lot of suggestions for the YouTubes here. Wayne says, love the legal perspective from Adrienne. Thank you, John, for being the gravity that brings all these fine guests. Thank you. And we're hopefully going to be like, we have this great crew and we're trying to bring in additional people as well. And hopefully some will be, exciting additions to the show in the very near future. Mendican says, is it possible that Trump's numbers are dropping because people dying of COVID because they wouldn't wear a mask, don't have time to answer polls? I doubt it. I don't know if the numbers are that big to swing it that way, but it would be karma. Luminia says, love you, John and Adrienne. Keep up the good work. Thank you. Def Tourette says, I forgot to add Adrienne is gorgeous. Thank you, Def, but let's keep it classy in the chat, but thank you. Zane says, facial recognition is a geometric color nightmare. Look, I just don't trust the cops with it. Honestly, I don't trust Facebook with it. I certainly don't trust the cops. Lee Sal says, why can't we vote for our own Supreme Court? I'm sure that would have issues too, but the current system's effed. Christopher says, was very happy to see you interviewing my friend, neighbor, and candidate for California's 12th district, Shahid Buttar, shahidforchange.com, everybody. Tori says, lobster is rich people food. It's for donor optics. Maybe. Ernie says, I want my $2, Johnny the Paperboy. Hey, I didn't beg, but thank you. And I will beg. Matt Cream says, our high COVID cases feel intentional now. Murder. I know that we're not supposed to say that. And like I said, a month and a half ago, I had an op-ed rejected for effectively asserting that about one media outlet. But at what point is it a strategy to kill people? Global says, great reporting, great exchange. Thank you so much. Thank you, Global. Nikki says, just a reminder, wearing mask under your nose doesn't count 100%. And Chris says, hey, John, just wanted to clarify the low man on totem pole is actually the most prestigious. Source, my full-blooded native Alaskan grandfather, master carver. Yeah, I had actually just recently heard that. I don't remember where. It might have been on Reddit or something, but I did actually hear that. And that is not the way that that's relayed, generally. Oh. There were so many super chats that I didn't see the Twitter section, but I see a note from Bart. This just broke according to the ACLU. Got to end the show on a hopeful note. Let me drag this in here. I don't know if it's going to be formatted right, but let's see. ACLU breaking. Members of Congress just introduced a bill to stop law enforcement use of face recognition technology. And the ACLU says no one should have to fear the government tracking and identifying your face wherever you go. No one, like our client Robert Williams, should have to fear being accused of a crime you never committed because of a flawed technology. Pass the long overdue bill. Thank you, Bart. That is very good news. I mean, we'll see what, the Congress ends up doing. But I'm glad. And again, AOC was mocked. It was like a 2-day news cycle of, look at this crazy AOC. She thinks computers are racist. No, it's demonstrated. She was interviewing people who were confirming that their studies had shown that. God, we are such an unserious country. But anyway, look, if this is a little bit of progress in the direction of getting rid of it, I'll take it. Okay. Jess Ortega says on hashtag TDR Live, yay, best part of my day. Adrienne Law, absolutely brilliant as well as beautiful. John, your background is cool. Thank you. And I also saw that Gabby had sent us a tweet saying, can we just quarantine Florida forever? Like coronavirus or not, I feel like we should just wall off that state. And one of the best gifts ever. I think my first tweet that went semi-viral actually was using that gif. So Gabby also says, Rao, the judge from that case we were talking about, is auditioning hard for RGB's spot in the Supreme Court. Don't say that, because it's true. It's 100% true, and I don't like it. Okay. Oh, one other board game related one. Bjorn says, what game is this? It's been bugging me and my roommate since you had Emma Vigeland on last. So that, I believe, it's not in the background now. Now Empires of the North is there. I believe that was Wasteland Express Delivery Service. Very good game. My wife and I have played that maybe more than any other game, actually. But anyway, that brings us to the end of our program. If you haven't already, check the channel for our interviews, which are not broadcast live, but they are uploaded to YouTube and to Facebook and all of that. We've got 2 awesome interviews we're going to be doing just a little bit later on in the day. Also, if you're not already following us at twitch.tv/TYT, we are having a game night tonight. A few people, including Jank Uger, are going to be joining us. I think we're playing Jackbox party games or something like that, so it should be a lot of fun. That's going to be happening later on today, but if you follow us, you'll get a notification, and then you'll know when it's happening. You can come hang out and chat. Anyway, thank you, everybody, for staying tuned. Oh, go to the community tab. Vote for the community garbage people of the week. Brett and I are going to be presenting our picks tomorrow. And with that, thank you, everybody. Stay safe out there.